I'm just about to admit a couple more people in the joining.
I'll give it a second then. Okay, we ready?
Yeah.
I'll crack on. Morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to this meeting of the Bus Advisory Board on the 17th of October. My name's Mike Rigby. I'll be chairing the meeting. The board meeting is not subject to the 1972 Local Government Act and therefore can continue to take place virtually. It's the only board members that are taking the decisions at the meeting. Others in attendance are there to provide advice to the board. The agenda and papers have been published on the council's website in advance of the meeting, and the council will be making a recording of the meeting, and this will be published on the council's YouTube channel and website in due course. I'd like to highlight that today's meeting will be run virtually via Microsoft Teams. Other elected members and officers may remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or to observe, and other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely via Microsoft Teams. There is also some provision for any members of the public to speak at the meeting via public questions or statements that have been submitted in advance. In terms of good practice, please use the meeting chat function only for the purposes of the meeting, primarily to indicate to me that you wish to speak. Please only speak at my invitation and after raising your hand virtually, and please say your name before speaking. Please also note the importance of turning off microphones and cameras when not speaking. Thank you. Apologies for absence. Joe, who do we have? I've seen John Hammond so far. Anyone else?
I don't actually have any other apologies for absence.
Okay. We'll note John's absence and move on. Minutes of the previous meetings held on the 18th and 25th of July. I'd like to adopt those minutes as approved. Does anyone have any comment formally? Peter Travis has his hand up. Peter.
Thanks, Mike. In the report on the 8th bullet point in the list of key issues, it says ideally the Bus Advisory Board should have been consulted about the closure of the Bridgewater depot in advance. Actually, the point that was made, because I made it, was that according to the EPS, one of the commitments of the operators is that they should consult the Bus Advisory Board before finalising changes to the frequency of services. It is something which is now being put in place, but it wasn't put in place at the previous Bus Advisory Boards, so I think that that minute should just be amended.
Okay, I'm happy to accept that unless anyone has any objection. David Redgewell has his hand up. Is this the same point or a different one, David?
It's slightly the same point, Mike. It's just that I also mentioned Yeovil bus depot in the discussions as well, and I don't think that's been recorded. Same point that Peter's making, but also about making sure that we're updated and kept updated on the outstation and the issues with First South and First Wales and West over that issue. Simon, I'm happy at the moment. I'm up to date, but just to say, I think the advisory board needs to be kept up to date as well. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, David. So, Joe, I'm happy to adapt that minute just to incorporate the points that Peter and David have made there about the two depots. So, if you can come up with a form of words that reflects their comments.
Can you just, would I be able to circulate something? Could they be approved subject to the amendment? And I obviously need a, and if you could point me to the right page, because obviously I wasn't actually at that meting.
Yeah, sure. You okay, David and Peter, just to
if I come back to them and then I can
to reflect that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
right.
it's just that obviously we capture the fact that my main thing is Bridgewater's a done deal, but whereas a lot of discussions going on, thank you very much, Simon, with his team over at Yeovil, and just want to make sure that we have some real discussion on Yeovil. But I'm
Yeah.
grateful to all the work Simon's doing in talking to people. Thank you.
Okay, can I ask that David and Peter, do you just give that some thought as to how you would like that minute to appear? I'd like to adopt the minutes at this meeting, so I'll skip over item 2 for now, but if during the course of this meeting you could perhaps put your heads together and just come up with a form that you'd be happier with, and we'll examine that and adopt it hopefully later in the meeting. Is that okay, chaps? Peter and David, you happy
Will
with that?
do. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sure Peter can draft something. He was the same meeting as me. It's just mentioning,
Yeah.
obviously, Bridgewater, there wasn't a lot of discussion about, but Yeovil there's a lot of discussion about, but it started from the fact we raised it and understanding the services out of the Yeovil area and how we're going to go forward with them. I think it's about 8 services first run out of the Yeovil area. A couple are going to Wales and the West Division there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, David. Simon?
Yeah, morning, everybody.
Morning, Simon.
Morning. Thanks, Chair. It'd just be helpful just to have a sight of that note before it's agreed, please. I just want to be clear what it is that is being minuted on those particular issues, particularly around Bridgewater and Yeovil. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I'd like to get that out of the way during this meeting, so hopefully Peter and David can propose an alternative form of words, and we can.
And
all
I'm very
agree
happy for Simon to put his 5 pennyworth in, Mike, to make sure it reflects where we are with the discussions on Yeovil now, which I think are quite positive at the moment.
Okay, just remind me, which of the 2 meetings is that you're talking about? Which minutes? Because we're talking about both the 2 meetings here.
The previous. Oh, I think it was the meeting when we talked about Bridgewater, and then we talked about Yeovil, and we talked about the future of the 54 and the 58 and the Yeovil group of services and what would happen with the depot closing and a new outstation depot being put in place. That was the point.
Well, if during the course of this meeting you can identify exactly which minute it is and from which meeting that you'd like to change, come up with a form of words. We'll come back to that at the end of the meeting. Is that all right? And then we'll
thank you.
We'll skip on. I think it's the longest discussion on minutes I've ever been party to, but we do need to get these things right. So let's move on. We'll come back to that. We'll move on to item 3, public question time. We have 2 questions submitted by Andy Strong. Joe, do you want to read those out?
So paragraph 2.5 of the Enhanced Partnership Scheme says the scheme will have no end date, but progress will be reviewed by SCC on a quarterly basis, and publicly accessible reports will be prepared on a routine basis. The review will also consider and report against BSIP targets outlined in Scheme Annex A. I have been unable to find any reports of such reviews, even though 5 should have been done by now. Please advise me how the public can access the reports.
Thank you. And Natasha, do you have any comment on that?
Oh, yes, I've got a response for that. So the BSIP funded schemes are reviewed on a quarterly basis, and progress is reported to the DFT as per their specific reporting requirements. With regard to reports being prepared on a routine basis, the intention is to report annually against BSIP targets as part of the BSIP annual review. So the BSIP was updated last October, but only at a high level, as we had not received the funding to start delivering the schemes at that point. That version is available on the Somerset Council webpage. And then this year's annual review was due in October, but the DFT have requested we put this on hold whilst they review their guidance. And therefore a decision was taken to wait until the new guidance is released to ensure we are delivering against any revised requirements from the DFT. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Natasha.
The second question is, First West of England Limited has been given approval by the Traffic Commissioner to use Wells Bus Station as an operating centre for 6 vehicles. I presume that Somerset Council, as the landowner, has approved this and is receiving payment to compensate for the additional wear and tear on the road surface in the bus station. Please confirm that the council is open to negotiation with other bus operators who may be interested in setting up operations in the county for use of its land as operating centres.
Thank you, Joe. And to Natasha again, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I just realised I didn't put my camera on just now. Okay, so I have a response from the operational team. So with the internal transfer within First of the operation of services 75 and most of service 29 from Buses of Somerset to First West of England, we received a request from First West of England to use Wells Bus Station to store up to 6 vehicles overnight, as we understood there was insufficient space at First West of England's Wells depot. So Wells Bus Station is now owned by Somerset Council, and internal discussions with our property team resulted in our making an offer to the First West of England to allow vehicles operated under contract to Somerset Council to be parked on the site on a temporary basis at the owner's risk. This was done to ensure that the services transferred could operate reliably from the date of transfer, and as this site is for the primary use of bus and coach services, then this was deemed an appropriate use of this land. However, this should not be considered as the council being prepared to allow any of its premises to be used as an operating centre for buses, and any further approaches from any operator would be considered on a case-by-case basis, as any site requested might not be suitable or have sufficient space for the overnight parking of buses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Andy Strong is with us, but I presume that we will message him with those written responses. Item 4, coordination of bus timetable changes. John Perrott to give us an update there.
Morning, everybody. My name is John Perrott. I'm the Operational Service Manager for Transporting Somerset. And item 4 is around the coordination of bus timetable changes. Just to give you the quick background to this, and this details are in the papers that were issued. This is pages 17 to 19 of the pack you received. The background is that at the Bus Advisory Board meeting in July 23, members agreed to 2 main timetable change dates per year, with flexibility maintained for unforeseen or emergency operational issues and seasonal changes where it is not possible to confirm the changes at the 2 main agreed dates. The date changes were agreed for Easter and the beginning of September in 2024, with the exact dates to be agreed at this meeting in October. The table on page 18 sets out the order of the process going forward. So I'll just talk you through that quickly. So for next year, registration periods, as most of you will know, is over 70 days. That allows 28 days for consultation and 42 days for the actual registration. So for the first date change at Easter, which will be on the Monday the 15th of April 2024, the consultation period is from the 5th of February to the 3rd of March 2024, and the Bus Advisory Board meeting date has been rescheduled for the 6th of February, the day after the start of the consultation period, so that operators can introduce the changes to the board for consideration and discussion. Following that and the opportunity to comment over the 28-day consultation, the registration period would start on the 4th of March, finish on the 14th of April, and essentially the services will be introduced on the 15th. The Q2 Bus Advisory Board takes place on the 23rd of April, and then the second consultation period for changes in September starts on the 24th of June, running to the 21st of July. And then again, we have changed the Bus Advisory Board date to fit in with that process. So the following day after the start of the consultation period, on the 25th of June, operators will introduce changes at the board again for consideration and discussion. The 28 days will run and then follow from the 22nd of July by the 42-day registration period, with changes to be introduced on Monday, the 2nd of September. And then from the October meeting, which is on the 15th of October next year, we will agree the specific date changes again for 2025, and that process will roll on from then on each year. And finally, on page 19, what we're asking operators to do is to complete a pro forma for the presentation, for their presentation at the Bus Advisory Board, which is a simple form which just introduces those changes and gives some basic details of the changes they wish to make of both those registration periods, and then operators are obviously invited to come along to the board and give further details. And so the recommendations on this item are that the specific dates for timetable changes and associated consultation and registration periods for 2024 are set out in table 1, and to use the pro forma Appendix A, as I've just described, for presenting those proposed changes to future board meetings to ensure clarity on any changes that are suggested.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Before seeking agreement from the operators, I'd like to invite comments from anyone present. Put your hands up, please. I can see David Redgewell's hand.
Yep, a couple of issues. I agree with all of that as long as we're in line with the WECA change dates and North Somerset, because in the north of the county, the services are obviously changed by First West of England. Thomas is on the call, so he can speak for himself, but we need to make sure that they're in line with the same dates. But equally, WECA changed a number of services recently with short-term changes in the part of the Kingswood area recently outside the change date. And also, of course, I was on a meeting dealing with BSIP last night for 2 hours with North Somerset and WECA with Councillor Hannah Young, who's the exec member. And 126 is obviously something we want to put in action, and we don't want to wait to Easter, John, to put that in action. We're delayed on that by 2 months now, and I think I'm just looking for action as agreed at the West of England Combined Authority and Joint Committee at Keynsham, Somerset last week. So as long as that doesn't get in the way of the 126, because everybody in the Wells, Winscombe, Banwell, whichever side of the part of Somerset you live in, wants that service back as soon as possible. And we also agreed to extend the BSIPs to 2026 as well in the north of the first Somerset.
Thank you, David. John, can you just respond to that in terms of both the 126 and the cross-border coordination issue, please?
Yep. So in terms of the registration process, yes, as I mentioned earlier, there is provision within this arrangement to allow for emergency or changes that, you know, are deemed necessary outside that normal process. So certainly 126 would fit into that category, and we're aware that people want that issue resolved as soon as possible. I can confirm that we've had a proposed timetable from North Somerset. I've actually been working on that this morning, and the plan is that by the end of this week, we will be looking to go out to tender again on that service. So we're currently just working through the stuff that's been provided to us by North Somerset, and we should be in a position to get a tender out by the end of this week. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I hope that gives the reassurance that you were looking for there, David. So any operators on the
Yes,
call?
thank you, Mike.
Thank you, David. Any operators on the call? If you could just lift a thumb or raise a hand to indicate your agreement to the process that John has outlined there, or raise your hand and tell me that you don't agree with it. Thank you, Simon. And I've got Dan there as well. Okay, so we'll take that as agreed. And Peter, thank you very much, Peter. We'll take that as agreed, thank you. And we will move on to item 5, updates from operators on the Taunton £1 fare, the government £2 fare, and service updates. So operators, who would like to jump in and tell me about how it's all going? Simon?
Happy to go, Mike, if that's okay. Yep. Right, I'm going to share my screen. Morning, everybody. Simon Goff, Managing Director for First South. I'm going to share my screen. I've got the usual sort of pack of slides that I run through with you at each meeting. So let's get those up. Okay, hopefully you can all see the slides.
Yep.
Lovely. Okay. So this morning I'd like to cover the changes to the network that we made in September and some subsequent tweaks that we are making to improve reliability and punctuality. We'll talk about the £1 fare in Taunton, the ongoing £2 fare cap across Somerset, and also overall performance of the network. So since the changes that were made in September, and obviously they were aligned to the closure of our Bridgewater depot, since then we've allowed the network to settle, and we always said that we knew that we were going to have to make some further tweaks to further improve reliability and punctuality. So on the 1st of October, we made some further changes to post-morning peak departures on routes 21, 21A and 22 to ensure much prompter departures. So that is in. And we have some further changes that are planned for the 27th of November. So from the 27th of November, there will be changes to the timetables that have been proposed for services 21, 21A, 22 and 51. And again, these are all designed to improve punctuality. There's some earlier morning journeys from Taunton to Bridgwater and Wellington to be introduced on the 21 and 22. And that's taken into account feedback that we've had and data that tells us that we need some earlier journeys between those points. Evening journeys on services 21 will be extended to Dumble, accessing distribution centres north of Bridgwater. And the Exmoor Coaster will be suspended during the winter months from that point as well. Services 55, 77, 77A will transfer to Wells Depot from the 27th of November. And in the last bus advisory meeting, I said that that was likely to be the case. That is now the date that those routes will be transferring across from Yeovil. No changes to the timetables from this date. However, there may well be some changes being planned by our Western Wales colleagues from the 1st of January. Again, they will be designed to improve punctuality and reliability. Just moving on now to the Taunton £1 fare. And as you can see, that is at route level. So rather than get into the individual route level, you can see that pretty much consistently, with April being a slight outlier, but consistently we've seen the steady growth of the number of people taking advantage of the £1 trip. So we've seen a 60% increase in passenger volumes from over the last 12 months, which is obviously a fantastic achievement, and it just goes to show that £1 fare is having a really strong impact. The biggest percentage increases we've seen on the 20, 22, 28 and the 30. The biggest volume growth that we've seen has been on the 1, the 2, the 6 and the 7, and patronage is currently at 92% of where it was pre-COVID. So that's pretty much in line with where the industry is at the current time. So with that £1 fare promotion, we are seeing those that level of growth, and it's helping contribute towards those routes being in about the same sort of level as the national average in terms of post pandemic recovery. So that's a really, really good sign. Now moving on to the £2 single. So this is the national cost of living help for households promotion, which has now been extended, as you'll be aware. It was due to be increased next month to £2.50, but it's now going to be retained at £2 and will continue to run until the end of November next year. So that's obviously good news all round. And you can see here the graph on the left-hand side. So that is the percentage of £2 trips being taken overall in January of this year, and where that sat at 38%. So 38% of all journeys in January 2023 were being made using the £2 fare, and that has since grown steadily. And you can see obviously there's been some peaks in the summer, but it's got our average up from 38 to 52%. So we can, as you can see there has been some ongoing growth. The last couple of months it's come down slightly from where it was in August, but generally the trend has been really positive, and it is good news. It's great news for the Somerset bus network that £2 fare is locked in now for the next 12 months at least, and then we'll see what happens there. We are obviously continuing to lobby government, so we're doing everything that we can to lobby for a longer term certainty for the industry, because the fear is, of course, as operators, that you get to this November 2024 date, and then what happens there? Is there a cliff edge moment where everything goes back to how it was? Well, clearly nobody wants that, and that wouldn't be the right thing. So So it's great that we've got the extension, but the industry needs to see a longer term package. It needs to be able to have confidence. The big bus operators need confidence to be able to invest in our futures, but that comes with some certainty of that longer term funding. Clearly, the week before last, when Rishi Sunak made his speech, there was some further. There was a further package for motorists that had been designed as well, and that kind of it becomes quite contradictory in terms of what we've been trying to achieve through EP and BSIPs and the National Bus Strategy, where of course a couple of years ago we were told that bus lanes you have them where you want them, and it's all about bus. There seems to have been a bit of levelling up in terms of the power to the car motorist again, and so we are continuing to lobby for longer term certainty and support across the industry. On the right hand side of the chart there, you can see the percentage share of £2 trips by route as well. And you can see that the routes at the top there, it's actually small for me to see, but hopefully you can see that in bigger form, but when I'm presenting it's in small form, but you can see the breakdown by route. In terms of Somerset passenger recovery, overall passenger volumes this financial year to date are at 21% ahead of last year, which is good news. You can see that the blue charts on the left hand side, that is this year's versus last year, and you can see that the orange line is the year on year impact. So overall passenger volumes year to date are at 21% higher than they were last year, which is really encouraging. 21A, 28, the 1 and the 77 are seeing the greatest volume growths. The 21A, the highest percentage increase at 165%, and the 1 at 80%, and the 50A at 63%. So overall, it's a positive picture. The £1 fare and the £2 fare, the buses have never been cheaper, and as a result of that, we are seeing existing or pre-existing bus users making more journeys. The challenge now, of course, is to provide a reliable and punctual network that will encourage people to change behaviours, leave the car at home, even if for 1 or 2 journeys a week or a month, whatever it might be. That's the bit that we need to get to now to drive that sustained behavioural change that will secure the networks for the future. In terms of reliability, I've been quite candid in my approach to reliability and punctuality, and I've not been happy at where it's been. I'll come on to lost mileage in a moment, but what you can see towards the right hand side of the punctuality chart though is that we are seeing, since we've closed the Bridgwater depot and realigned our business, realigned our network, you can see that consistently week on week toward the right hand side there, we are seeing an improvement in punctuality, but that's not where we still want it to be a lot higher. We want to strive towards 95%. As you can see, we're getting towards 90. It's got to be higher. Now, the changes that I've outlined that are due in November, from the 27th of November, are designed purely to help improve that number further, because I recognise that we can't possibly expect people to change their behaviours, leave their cars at home, if we don't deliver what we say we are, what we are saying that we will. So the changes introduced on the 1st of October, as I said, have ensured prompter departures post AMP. I've gone through that, and the further timetable changes from the 27th of November will continue to add and improve our ability to increase and improve those punctuality, start time adherence positions. We're also looking at the review of dead running times to ensure that the bus, when it arrives at the first stop in the morning, is there, and that really is bread and butter basics that we should be getting right. Last couple of slides. Lost mileage. So lost mileage. It's been, as I say, I've been very candid about the challenges that we've had. I've not been comfortable where we've been. And we have had some significant lost mileage. So immediately after the closure of Bridgwater depot, we had some challenges with driver availability. We knew we had enough drivers. We had enough drivers to run the network, but we've had some major challenges with driver availability, mostly down to sickness. And at one point, we had over 25 drivers who weren't able to present themselves for work. So when that happens, you obviously allow for a certain amount of sickness and a certain amount of holiday. But unfortunately, when you get a spike of that magnitude and it all happens at the same time, it's very, very difficult to react. Now, we have, however, brought in, whilst we have this sickness spike, we have brought in some additional agency drivers, plus some lone drivers up from Cornwall who have been supporting for the past 4 weeks. And I'm pleased to say that you can see on the right-hand side there that the lost mileage, I mean, it really did peak at a high level. That was the same week that myself and Councillor Rigby had a conversation about, we really hoped that that was the peak and that things were going to improve. And I had sight of a very clear plan of how that was going to be achieved. And you can see that since then, over the last 3 weeks, it's been a continued and sustained improvement. And our lost mileage is now at under 1%. And that's a combination of traffic, mechanical, and driver. But driver was down at 0.4% last week, which is the lowest it's been for years, if I'm quite honest. So I'm satisfied that the plan is in place. My team, the local team now, the challenge is to sustain it, and they know full well that has to be achieved. And I'm confident that that's going to be the case, because that sickness number is not growing. It's only getting smaller as we obviously provide as much welfare support as we can to our people to get them back to work. We continue to recruit. We have a healthy pipeline of trainee drivers coming through the system, which is fantastic. From next year, the way that we train will be slightly different. So the SPS Hinkley Point Training Academy will be separated from our own. So we're going to have greater capacity still into next year, so that we can really make sure that we've got our own Buses of Somerset group of drivers, and the agency drivers and the Cornwall drivers obviously return. But the phone is ringing, people are interested, we're paying a very competitive wage, and I'm really hopeful that we'll by the new year we'll be fully established with our own staff. We're improving how we react and how we can react to breakdowns, and we are seeing our mechanical lost mileage come down as a result. So we've got more effective measures in place to deal with breakdowns as and when they occur, and that number is reducing. We brought in a new engineering manager as well. Last slide for me, and that is around what are we doing to promote the fact that we have got a really good network of services across the county. And again, just referring back to my conversation with Councillor Rigby 4 weeks ago, I said to him that I wasn't overly confident about shouting from the rooftops about our great network, because it hadn't been reliable. We had been letting customers down, and I'm fully committed to getting that network reliable, getting it punctual, and at the point be much more confident to shout about it and help people change their behaviours and leave the car at home. So there's lots going on with regards to the Busset campaign that we're fully supporting. We've got some route recovery campaigns that are being built ready for November, and there's some examples of some of the promotional material that we'll be using across the piece. We've got some improvements being made to our customer app as well, so the journey planning app and the ability to track in real time services. So all that is coming, and of course we'll continue to support the Busset campaign, the Taunton £1 single fares, which have obviously shown to be working. So yes, we've come from a difficult place. We're in a much better place now, and my primary objective and my team's primary objective now is to sustain that level of service that we've proven that we can deliver as we move forward, and encourage that behavioural change so we can protect and secure the network of Buses of Somerset for the longer term future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. That's a really useful run through of where we're at with the various issues, and thank you for picking up the challenge when we spoke 4 weeks ago on punctuality and reliability. And my postbag is normally a fair reflector of how the network's operating, and it's certainly been much quieter in the last 10 days or so, which I think is reflected in that much reduced, much improved missing miles figure. I'm glad to see that we are moving forward with regards to recovering pre-COVID levels, not quite there yet, but it's when we started this challenge a year ago, I think we were at somewhere beginning with a 6. So to see it up from 60% odd to 92% is really very positive indeed, and I'm pleased to see the impact of the £1 and £2 fares. But I think you're right, in as much as we need to see how that plays out in the longer term and what future measures may be in place. But obviously very good news that the £2 fare has been extended into all the way through next year pretty much, and I think that will continue to help us build. And I think that improved punctuality and reliability gives us the confidence to then go out and really bang the drum. And to, we agreed that we're going to do some joint marketing. That's beginning to start now. But I think having seen that improvement in the last couple of weeks really does give us the ability to go out and promote the service in a way that was more difficult when, frankly, people couldn't really rely on it on a wide scale basis. So thank you very much, Simon, for picking up that challenge and for meeting it. And I think that for the future now, it's please carry on as we are. Let's there's still room for improvement, but we need to make sure, because we've had, let's be brutally honest about it, a few false dawns in the past after difficult periods, and we now need to maintain the excellent progress that you've made. So thank you for that. So what I'll do is we'll go through, if we may, all the operator updates, and then I will take questions of each at the end of that process. So Dan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, but I had a question for Simon. Did you want to do that now, or did you want to do the other operators?
No, you can do that now. Go on, you might as well do that now.
Great, thanks. When some good news there. Obviously slightly disappointing to hear about the complete loss of the Exmoor coaster over a winter period, as opposed to maybe a reduction. Just a couple of queries on that though, really, Simon, if I may. One is, I think if I read the slide correctly, that was from the 27th of November. I think the summer timetable was due to end at the end of October, so I wasn't quite sure what's happening in November for that. And also just would really appreciate if there is any kind of indication you can give of future plans for coaster. Obviously, as a seasonal service, we're kind of working on publications, etc., for next summer already, so it would be helpful to know if this is a sign of kind of actually the coaster is done and dusted, or whether it is just for winter service that's impacted.
Simon?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I mean, we've analysed the Exmoor coaster across the season, and it's a strong performer. But we've also analysed it over the course of last winter, where it hasn't been a strong performer. So at the moment, that is our plan, and it's not the end of the Exmoor coaster. Far from it. It's been as I say, it's performed really strongly. It's been nominated for several awards, and we've had issues with getting everybody on because it's become so popular. But it's so popular in the summer months, so we are going to be withdrawing it for a couple of months over the winter. I will double check, and I'm speaking to my team as we speak now about when the likely reintroduction date is going to be, and I'll come back to you on that one.
Thank you, Simon. Other operator updates. Who wants to go next? Peter Ferry, want to say anything at this stage?
Yeah, I'd like to echo a lot of what Simon's already said with regards to the £2 fare. Actually, we have also seen a year-on-year growth, I think quite attributed to the £2 fare, which has been very helpful. We're up by 19% on this time last year on general travel. However, as we're probably all still feeling, concessionary fares, people travelling haven't returned in the numbers that we had hoped, and what we can do as a group in order to try and attract that group of people back onto the buses. But as a general rule, the £2 fare seems to have worked very well, and I too have concerns about any potential cliff edge that we head off when you go from a £2 fare at the end of November 2024 into potentially a £6 single fare on some of our longer journeys. And the fact that it's been in place for so long that people are really going to struggle with that change. But hopefully there is some follow-up funding coming to that to bridge the gap so that it isn't a massive cliff edge. But I think every operator is worried about that. Passenger numbers are, like I said, growing, which is good. However, we still have challenges across our network as well. Specifically, the number 1 service from Shepton Mallet to Yeovil. That is something that we have got a talk with Somerset County Council planned on that one, because it is underperforming in its current state, and it is not a service that can continue in its current format. So we need to look at the timetable on that and what we can do as a group. So that is a warning. The rest of the services that we operate are solid at this time, but the number 1 service from Shepton Mallet to Yeovil is problematic and something we need to look at and do some work on. Apart from that, we have recently in the last year put in our own training. We run our own training company, but we've put our own training bus in, and we're training people on a regular basis and putting drivers into the marketplace, which is good. But there's still never enough drivers, unfortunately, as the other operators will undoubtedly find. We're working hard to do it. We're putting a lot of money into it, but there's still not enough drivers in the marketplace to make our whole network, including bus services and school transport and private, to get people onto our books and train them and get them through. But as probably everyone on this call is aware, that is a really slow process and an expensive one in order to get people with licenses to us, because they don't just walk through the front door like they used to, unfortunately. But yeah, things aren't as gloomy as they were this time last year. So it is a positive.
Thank you very much for that update, Peter. I think you're right in as much as what comes next after the current end date of the £2 fare is going to be crucial. It's something that we at Somerset Council, and I personally have lobbied the DFT and the Secretary of State to continue, and I'm very pleased that that's carried on, and we'll continue that effort. I think we all work together on this, and to whoever is carrying out that job in November next year. If we can make them understand the importance of that £2 fare and in continuing it, I have some confidence.
£2 fare, even if it is bridged, even if it goes to £2.50 fare, then £3, then £3.50 fare, whatever happens, it just cannot be a cliff edge. I think that is going to be the challenge, and the challenge is that people will get used to that fare over such a large period of time that suddenly bus travel will seem strangely unaffordable when it ends, which is going to be our challenge. And I don't want the people we've encouraged onto a bus to suddenly leave us because it suddenly looks expensive, even though it is still cheaper than what it was probably pre-pandemic.
Yeah, no, undoubtedly, and we'll all work together to that end. Any other operators? Sing out now is your opportunity. I'm not sure who we've got on the call. Anyone else want to say their piece at this stage, or I'll open it up to questions. Thomas. Hello, Thomas.
Good morning. I'm Thomas Hughes, the operations manager for Bath and Wells for First Bus. I think Simon's alluded to a lot of the points that I've probably got. The 77 transfer to Wells next month, where preparations are well underway for that. And as he mentioned, we're also going to be reviewing the reliability of our services, because that's one of our key focuses at the moment. A lot of our routes across the network are quite long distance, which can lead to its own challenges, but it's something we're aware that we need to make improvements on, and that includes our routes out to Frome from Bath as well. So there's a review currently underway of that. And then our driver recruitment as well for Wells particularly is looking quite strong, which is positive. Obviously, we'd always like more, but we're pushing forward ahead with that. And yeah, just to echo the other comments really around the £2 fare, I think for our routes out of Wells specifically, and our routes to Frome, a £2 fare is an incredibly attractive offer for people to travel those distances. And the concern is next year, how do we phase from that, because you don't want to suddenly undo all the hard work that's gone into it. So yeah, quick update from me, but I think that covers everything.
That's great. Thank you very much, Thomas. Any other operators before I open up to questions from the floor? Anyone else? No, in which case we'll take the first question from David Redgewell, please.
Thanks. A few questions. First of all, probably the person you can all blame for Wells bus station becoming a bus depot was I sat down with Doug Claring-Bold and we had a conversation about the vehicles at Wells, and we needed a depot. And quite frankly, Somerset County Council, if you want a bus service, you've got to deal with the operating centres. And I'm looking forward to a meeting with Michael Dale-Jones to talk about this very issue, because both Cornwall and the West of England Mural Combined Authority protect their depots and work with the operators. In fact, they lease out, as I said to Mike, a number of sites to go southwest in Cornwall for them to operate buses from. So we've got to get over this issue of property services and money and work out what we want from a public bus service. On the issue of where we go with, I think you need to talk to the Labour Party and the Liberal Party, quite frankly. I don't think you can, it's a general election coming and the future bus policy, read the documents that were agreed in Bournemouth and agreed in Liverpool would be my advice. I'm sorry, but we live in a democracy and we may have to lobby hard for bus service funding from Louise Haigh and the Liberal Democrats in England. On the issues locally, Simon, I'm very grateful. We're down to, I think, we've pinned it right down to, I can see 3 routes now where we need some work. The 22 is popping up as a difficulty. I've been monitoring that, and I know so have some of the bus user group in Wellington, where we've had reliability and punctuality issues. And the others I keep getting told about, Mike, is the Lady Moor, the estate Priorswood in the morning journeys, and Normandy Drive. I can pin them right down now, Normandy Drive and Gamington. And those are the routes that still have a problem with every morning. Not this morning, Simon, yesterday, it was yesterday, but this morning they were great. But that's the ones we need to home in. So it's Taunton Town Services, and that's why I've said to Peter, who are very much welcome to your team, we need to really home down. But it's brilliant because you've done a huge lot for us. You know, buses are now standing spare at Minehead, got buses standing spare at Yeovil. And I think we're looking at the depot issues at Yeovil. So I think we've come an awful long way in 3 weeks, but we just need to keep going on it. And I do welcome all the spare drivers at first have drafted in from all over the country towards Somerset to keep the service and Dorset to keep the services going. I think the other point I'd make is cleaning. We still need to keep looking at cleaning, both at Wells and at Taunton. So I'm not going to pick Jenny Opco and just say, there's still issues around cleaning. With Thomas, it's maybe the exteriors of the Mendip Explorers. There's very little lost mileage there, although we do get some. In Taunton, and I've spoken to the new engineering guy. It is the interiors that we need to keep picking up on. So those points. I am really concerned about negative advertising. I'm horrified to see stuff on Facebook that says this route's closing down. These routes are going, Mike. We can't have that. We need a positive message on buses. And we need to make sure that we market the whole of Somerset's bus network in the way Devon and Dorset do, because we've just had from South West Coaches, they own Beeline as well. We just need to make sure we market everything in Somerset, not just 4 routes. We can just market Somerset's bus network and right up into the north, into West of England as well. I think giving the opportunity we can go by bus, and we can get to by bus in the county and also up into Bristol and Bath. I think that's going to be more productive than threatening and saying this route may go or that route goes. It gives real negative connotations to passengers, I must admit, and I'm hearing that feedback regularly from customers. So those would be my points. On the 2120, whilst we've got Simon and Thomas on the call, I'm working with the Mayor of Highbridge and Burnham. It's a vital journey from Weston-super-Mare to Highbridge and Bridgewater, because we've got the hospitals up there, we've got the college, we've got University College, we've got shops, we've got banks, everything in Weston that people rely on in the North Sedgemoor area. And so those services tying up through tickets and making sure there's through journeys is crucial to passengers. So I just would like some more work on that corridor to make sure it performs, whether it goes back to one bus service between Weston and Taunton, which is my suggestion again. But I think it is looking an awful lot better. And the main thing is we need to come up with an operating centre at Yeovil that can maintain the network in Yeovil. On the bus stations, I think, Mike, there's an awful lot of work to do with your team about understanding what their usage, where we need to use them. And if we need to put coaches and buses in them overnight, then that should be a legitimate use, whichever the operator. And I was a bit disappointed to hear all that property services rubbish. And sorry, I didn't call it that, but that's why I want to marry with Mike Aldell-Jones and why I've raised it at other places. We need to understand our bus stations and our bus depots. But thank you, Simon, for your good work. And Thomas, I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I think there were mostly suggestions there for Thomas and Simon, but I'll give you a quick opportunity to come back on anything that you might want to there, either of you.
Just as always, to thank David for his feedback, and it's great that you know you recognise that locally Peter McNaughton is a guy that will help get things done as well. So please keep that dialogue going locally, David, and thank you for your kind words about the improvements that you've noticed. But as I say, my priority now is sustaining that. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon. I'll just pick up very briefly, David, the issue about marketing. We are doing county-wide marketing on bus services, not just the 4 that are under threat. But I disagree with you on the approach. I think it's really important that people understand that without further use, those services won't continue in their current form. I don't want that to come as a surprise to anyone next year, if and when those services continue to be underused and can't continue in their current form. And I think what it's also done is give us an opportunity to work with local councillors, to work with local parish councils and town councils to get them to put their shoulder to the wheel as well to help boost that usage. I guess the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but we'll keep a close eye on that campaign to make sure that it's working. Councillor Dave Mansell, please.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, a couple of questions, please. On the reliability issue, and yes, the feedback I get is that there have been improvements, and that it had got pretty dire, it has to be said, towards the end of 2022, which clearly doesn't encourage bus use. Part of the frustration, but the issues do still occur and problems still arise. Related to this, bus users have a problem reporting the reliability problems. There's the online app, and there is ability to do it through First Bus, but there's no response given and nothing seems to happen. Simon, would you be able to comment on how to report problems with reliability so they get addressed, because some issues just keep rolling on and seem to be it feels like being ignored. So that's one question, and the other one is in relation to the bus user numbers and the statistics. So very helpful to see the slides. Could I ask, can they be shared, please, and perhaps those from earlier board meetings as well, so we have slightly better access to view those numbers. And I'm particularly interested in the 25 service. Would it be possible, please, to provide some more detail on the use of the 25? I would really love to see the numbers going back to before COVID. So if there can be some representation, even if it's annual, but more detail would be welcome, but some indication of how the use of the service has gone from before COVID and then for each year since COVID as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Simon.
Yeah, thank you, David. Just going back through those points with regards to the 25, not something that I have to hand, obviously, but something that I can take away, and we could share something with you. So I'll pick that one up. In terms of contacting us, I mean, clearly David Redswell and some others have built up a local rapport with our new operations manager. So I would consider how you might be able to access Peter, or whether that be through David, but fundamentally, like any customer, we would expect them to contact us either through the app or through our website, and we have a customer services team that will obviously engage with you and listen to your feedback, and that will then be, if it's particularly around reliability, punctuality, that will be passed to the commercial teams. So we've mentioned Peter, who's our ops manager. We've also got Stuart, who's our network planner, and between the two of them, they will pick that feedback up and decide if there's something that can be actioned off the back of it and get back to you. So there's plenty of means and ways. I'm sorry that in the past you felt like you've struggled to get in touch with us. And if you have any particular examples, then please do share them with me, and I'll help to unpick those. But that shouldn't be the case now, and hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Simon. And
if I may, Mike.
Yes, I was just going to say before you do, Dave, Simon, could you send those slides that you presented today to Jo Morris, and she could distribute them to the attendees today? Is that okay?
Yeah,
thank you. And Dave Mansell.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Simon. Would it be possible to pass on the contact details that you mentioned for Peter and I think it was Stuart? That would be helpful. Just by way of example, although I wonder whether it's the best one, but it is one that's been consistent. The Langley Cross stop has kept being missed out, which is used by college students. Unfortunately, at the moment, though, we've just got roadwork started up exactly at Langley Cross and the road from it. So I think the roadworks are going to now disrupt stopping there. But that is a very real recent example, and one that just keeps occurring. So, but there are others in general as well. Milverton, I would have to pick up as well. Stopping in Milverton has continued to be a real problem. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. If you could pick those up offline, Simon, that'd be great. Councillor Rodriguez.
Thanks, Mike. I just got one question for Simon. Simon, Diego Rodriguez, opposition spokesman for Transport and Digital. A question around the £1 Taunton fare. You said patronage is about 92% of where we were pre-COVID, which is in line with the industry at this time, with the national average. I just wondered if you could explain that a bit further to me. I wasn't able to see the slides, my fault for some reason, and also the presentation did cut out slightly, probably my internet. So you may have already covered this in your presentation, but specifically, I want to know if Taunton's in line with the national average, what added benefit is the £1 fare having compared to the rest of the country? And maybe you could also tell me what the percentage difference in patronage is between Taunton and the rest of Somerset from those pre-COVID levels. Again, you may have covered this, but I wasn't able to see the slides on my screen.
Sure. I think what the impact of the £1 fare tells us is that clearly it's having a massive impact, and without it, patronage potentially may not be anywhere near where the national average is, because the national average obviously has the £2 fare benefit. The £1 fare benefit obviously is that additional discount. So I think without it, the question would be, well, how many people would still pay £2 versus the £1? Well, we just don't know. But with the £1 fare being in place, it's helping those routes in particular perform better than some of the routes that outside of the Taunton £1 fare zone. I haven't got the exact data to hand, but you know, I'm not sure whether the £1 and £2 makes a huge difference, but I do think that within those routes, it has proved to be successful. I'm not sure that answered your question, but without having additional data and me to go back to talk to the network team, it's hard for me to do so. But as I say, I will share the slides, and perhaps if you weren't able to see them earlier, you could have a look through. If there's some questions that remain, then please do contact us directly, and we can look into that for you. But clearly it's having an impact because those routes are performing better than most. But ultimately, still, you know, we're still looking at 92%, which is the average with that additional discount in place.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, we better move on. We're a little bit behind schedule. So thanks very much for those updates and for the questions. And we're going to move on to item 6 now, which is an update on the Zebra 2 process. Natasha.
Thank you. Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Natasha Bates, Service Commissioning Manager for Passenger Transport within Somerset Council. So this is just a kind of quick update on the Zebra 2 funding. So the government have recently announced a new round of Zebra 2 funding. So for those of you not familiar with the term, Zebra stands for Zero Emission Bus Regional Area. And so for this round of funding, the DfT are actually focusing initially on rural areas, which is really encouraging for us that seems to be their priority area. So just to give you a quick overview, in terms of eligibility for the funding, the DfT are looking for local transport authorities who have not received Zebra funding previously. They are looking for local authorities that meet their definition of rural, and they've got various definitions set out in the guidance. You need to be able to demonstrate that the buses where the zero or the area where the zero emission buses are introduced are actually being used on rural services, so that they're bringing passengers in from rural communities, probably into an urban hub, but they have to predominantly serve those rural communities. Local transport authorities must have an enhanced partnership plan and scheme in place. Vehicles eligible for funding are zero emission buses and minibuses used on local bus services, and bids will only be accepted for new buses. So vehicles that are retrofitted or repowered with technology to become zero emission buses will not qualify. So that's a little bit about the eligibility. And then in terms of funding available, so we understand there's up to £89 million in the financial year 23-24 and up to 40 million in the financial year 24-25. And I think what they've done is they've got 25 million initially reserved for rural proposals, but the DfT may decide to allocate up to 50 million if enough bids of sufficient quality are received. So in terms of actually allocating funding, the DfT will contribute up to 75% of the cost difference between a zero emission bus and a standard conventional diesel bus, equivalent of the same total passenger capacity. So that's what they'll fund in terms of vehicles. And then for infrastructure, the DfT will contribute up to 75% of the total capital expenditure incurred as a result of the purchase and installation of the infrastructure. So that's a little bit about the funding that's available. So what they're asking local transport authorities to do, because any bids have to be led by the local transport authority, we have to submit our notification of intention to apply by the 20th of October, and then applications need to be submitted by the 15th of December. And then there's a series of events that would happen in the new year in terms of them analysing and assessing those applications before awarding any funding. And for those authorities that are successful with funding bids, then orders for zero emission vehicles would need to be placed by the 31st of January 2025. So this was already good news, very encouraging that they're looking at rural authorities. So what we've done is we've contacted all the public bus operators registered through our DPS tendering system to make them aware of the opportunity, setting out all the points I've just mentioned around eligibility and funding available. And we asked operators to express their interest to us if they would be interested in working on a combined bid with us. So I'm pleased to say we have had contact from one operator who's interested in pursuing this opportunity. And we're just currently discussing this further. And then once we've got more of an update and we're in a better position to be able to do so, we'll be able to provide you with some more information. But it's really just to let you know that this opportunity exists. We have got an operator interested, and it's really good news, and we're really keen to work on this further, and we'll update you as and when we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, really positive news there that we have the opportunity to do this. So let's hope that moves forward to fruition. Any questions on that? David, you've got your hand up. David Redgewell. I'm not sure if that's from before.
No, it's the same one. Just goes back to why we need to be more concise about the way we use depots as well, Mike, because some of the bids involve depots in other counties. And bus stations. But the other one I would say to Natasha, I was on a call for 2 hours last night with North Somerset colleagues, and they've got a bid going on in the north, in Western area. Now, I think it's worth Somerset talking to North Somerset Council and First Group about that particular bid as First Wales and West, to see whether or not there may be an element where it crosses the boundaries around Western, Mike, and comes into what used to be Sedgemoor. Because obviously, if we get one bid or two bids, it's all good for the area. So I just asked Natasha to have a conversation, or Mike, perhaps you could also give Councillor Hannah Young a ring and have a chat about that particular issue as well. Thanks.
Thank you, David. We're always keen to make sure that we coordinate with our neighbours. So I'm sure that that's something that Natasha can take on board as part of the process that we're involved in now. Thank you, David. Any other questions on this? Peter Travis.
Just for clarification, does that mean that we have to get notice of an intention to bid in by the end of this week, Natasha?
Yes, that's correct. But my understanding is it is just as simple as just an email to the DFT saying we're intending to bid, and then the application will follow later in December.
Thank you, Natasha. Okay, so yeah, that seems to have concluded this item. Thank you very much for all the work you've done on this, Natasha. I think it's really exciting. Lots of people have been lobbying for electric buses to come to Somerset. So now we have the opportunity. Let's try and make that work. So thank you very much for that. Item 7, Somerset's bus information strategy, and back to Natasha again.
Thank you. Yes, this is just a quick update on where we are with the bus information strategy. So we're currently working with WSP to just pull together our information strategy, and that's going to pull together all the elements of the work we're doing around information. So that includes things such as the QR codes, so the trial we started at the bus stops in Taunton and rolling that out further, the bus stop audits, Think Travel, Journey Planner, Somerset Council website and how we use that to share information as well, and also the Somerset Bus Passenger Charter. So there's various elements involved with that, and that will all be drawn together into one overarching strategy. I think it's probably important just to highlight again at this point that obviously we didn't secure all the funding to deliver all the elements originally set out in the BSIP, so we will be restricted by our budgetary constraints, and the strategy will obviously reflect that. But we are working on that and hope to have that finalised shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. Any questions from board members, please? Peter Travis's hand straight in there. How did I know that was going to happen, Peter?
Yeah, inevitably. You listed a number of things, all of which I welcome being included in the bus information strategy. The notable omission is printed materials, and if you come to any of our bus stalls, you go to any tourist information centre, it's printed materials and information at bus stops, which is so important. I assume, I very much hope, that that will be a key part of your information strategy.
Yeah, sorry. So in terms of timetables at bus stops, we'll obviously be carrying on working with operators and making sure that that information is out there. We haven't printed, I don't know if you're talking about timetable books, we haven't printed those for many years, and obviously that would be more challenging in terms of our budgetary constraints, but certainly looking at the timetables at bus stops would be in there.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Tony.
Quick question. Can you see me? Yes. Quick question on the QR codes. I've had it pointed out to me many times that QR codes on bus stops are fine if there is sufficient internet connection. The old system, which actually identified the bus stop by code and referred you to texting, is still a valuable use to an awful lot of people. There seem to be about 500 or 600 bus stops still with those codes up, although a lot of them have come down. But it would help if on the QR code leaflet you actually identified the code of the bus stop and the texting information that used to be on those posts. I know texting costs, but there are an awful lot of people without smartphones or where the Wi-Fi is not good enough who could use that. And that information is as good as any other about providing information about what buses are due and how late they're running. So I'm just asking, could the QR code posters, which I haven't seen yet, include the bus stop number and a simple information like there was on the plates that were on every bus stop, to include that information?
Okay, yep, that's noted. Thank you, Tony. So our public transport manager who's leading on this project, he's actually on the call, so he will have heard that, but I will just make sure that he's noted that and see if that's something we can incorporate.
Thank you.
Thank you. On that point, Natasha, is that a nationally provided service, that text service? Because I was always quite surprised that it cost something like 25p, which, you know, if you're using it on a fairly regular basis, would soon mount up. Or is that something that we control?
I think I might have to defer that to John because I'm afraid I don't know. Sorry.
Any ideas, John?
I think it's a national service, Mike, but we can check that.
Okay. I mean, I think given the way that things have moved on in the last 10, 15 years, it's been around for a long time, that I'm not sure why it needs to cost 25p, frankly. So if there's a way of us inputting into that process to say, look, can we do something about this? You know, we're all used to using plenty of services where the text service is free. So if we can do something about that, it might be of greater use than it currently is. I'll leave that with you, John.
Yep.
David Redgewell.
So, thanks, Mike. Well, I think it was about a year ago, we talked about getting First to work with us like Cornwall and produce a Somerset-wide book with First Wales and West and First South. It was in that times it was slightly different names, but it still makes sense. There's a booklet produced for Taunton, Yeovil, and Bridgewater. But if we incorporate, I mean, there's also services run by First West of England in that book, 2975. But if we were to incorporate 173, 376, 172, 174, those are Bath to Wales, by the way, and Street to Bristol, and the Frome to Bath service, and we could also then work with the smaller operators. Now we got key timetable dates. Surely the county and First can produce a booklet like Devon and like Cornwall. And the other point is, I do a lot of work in Dorset where my family are, and the parish councils do an awful lot more. It's giving them a lecture about buses coming off the road is one thing, but the other thing is we get them to fund the buses in Dorset, Beamister Town Council, Bridport Town Council, Cough. We also get them to put up timetables and publicity. And we've got some very big town councils like Taunton and Bridgewater and Minehead that are not poor, Wellington, Yeovil. And we should be talking more about, I was with John's second name now, the former executive member, when we put the 67 together and we got the council to pay for the Burnham-on-Sea to Wells bus, and they still fund it. So I think there's a funding exercise with the councils in Somerset, and there's also a marketing exercise with the council in Somerset. Just going and having a meeting with them and telling this route might be the threat doesn't do any good to me, but they've actually got cash, and in other parts of the southwest and in Devon, they fund. And all I was going to say on some of the under threat routes, Mike, are we talking to Angela about the Exmoor, the gap from Minehead to Linton in the winter, because she may have some cash and Exmoor National Park may have some cash. And equally on the 25, we should be talking to Exmoor Park and Devon. And I'm not sure we've spoken to Dorset on the 58 from my conversations with Dorset. So there's a lot more work to do here, but I think Somerset is not an island, and we know we work a lot with Wecker and North Somerset, and that's to be welcomed. But I think sometimes we need a bit more work with the town and parish councils and with our neighbours. I know that I think Tony would always raise the number 6 and say we could work much more closer on the Dorset 6. That's the Bridport to Yeovil service, to make sure we get more services on there. But I think there's a piece of work here, and everybody got BSIP money, with the exception of Wecker area and North Somerset any extra. And I think we just need to make sure we're spending it wisely together. So that's my points. But on marketing, please, the Cornish book's brilliant, Simon. Could we not arrange some sort of meeting to try and do a Devon or a Cornish book next summer for the tourist season for Somerset?
Thank you for that, David. I mean, I'll leave that suggestion with Simon in particular to see if that's something that can be delivered for the next season. But with regard to the opportunity for parish and town councils to perhaps contribute to the running of services, that's precisely why we've carried out the marketing campaign that we have done. And we've had a meeting specifically for parish and town councils that cover the affected routes, the 4 that are currently under threat. And one of the opportunities there through the discussions that we're having is precisely that they may be able to assist with the funding of those services in the future if we don't get them to the level of patronage to make them viable. But that's the first challenge, is to get them viable in their own right, and that's what we're hoping to do. But ultimately, if they don't know, if parish and town councils aren't aware that the service is under threat, why are they ever going to come forward and possibly help to offer funding to operate them? So that's the process that we're going through. I fully accept the point that you're making there. Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to come back on that. So, David, I'm assuming that you're referring to the Cornwall A4 timetable booklet. Just to be clear.
Yes, Simon, and the Devon books. I think they're brilliant.
Okay.
You've got everything in those books and the trains and coaches as well.
I would just call just a note of caution. They're extremely expensive to produce, and there's an awful lot of wastage that we see. So we do accept that there is a certain number of people, there is a demographic that does require a physical timetable booklet, don't have access to internet, smartphones, etc. But they are something that we are trying Cornwall to phase out, not phase out completely, but to reduce the number that we produce because they're just so expensive. So it's about finding the right medium. We're doing some route level guides in Cornwall as well, which are sometimes just as effective. So don't be surprised if that big thick A4 booklet, which is not practical, it doesn't fit in your pocket, it barely fits in a handbag, it doesn't, and it is not the end result in a year or two's time. So I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Simon, I'm happy with the Weymouth ideas where you've got guides for where my mum lives, and we got various booklets that cover, but what we don't have in Somerset, up in Doug's bit, is anything like that at all at the moment. So if we had something, even a route guide that took you from Yeovil to Bristol and Bath with south and west would be very helpful, I think.
Yeah,
Things like that,
I agree. I agree. The way forward is route guides are more practical. We don't need to print as many, but to make sure they're available. But I think with people that need a network guide because they don't have access to smartphones and internet, we need to make them available and make sure they know how to get hold of them so that we actually print the number that we need for the people that need them and stop all the wastage that does happen right across the industry because it's not something that we can afford. But we need to get information out there at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I hope that helps, David, and we can continue that conversation offline afterwards. I'm going to move on now, if I may, because I'm aware that Tim Reynolds, who's going to present item number 8, needs to get away in the not too distant future. So straight on to item 8, Tim Reynolds, please.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much for that. I've got a few slides just to share, so I'm going to try and share my screen and just talk you through that. So I'll be covering the bus user satisfaction survey that's been ongoing. So hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, right. So yes, so this is just really just to give you a very high level overview of the work that's been going on over the last 4 and a bit weeks with a subcontractor that we've been using, Queenswood Engagement Services. They've been undertaking surveys across the Somerset bus network. So as part of the work through the BSIP, we are required every year to conduct an annual bus user satisfaction survey and to feed those results into reporting that we do to DFT, but also to use them to analyse how the bus service improvement plan is being perceived, how it's going down, how it's performing, how various elements and aspects of the bus network are performing, to give us an idea of how we need to refocus things as we review the BSIP on an annual basis and work obviously very closely with bus users, other bus user groups, bus operators and other stakeholders to make some improvements. So the survey is gauged, or is designed really to gauge levels of satisfaction across a number of metrics, and it will hopefully shape the future of the BSIP. We tried to aim for about 1,000 responses as a good sample size. We had an aim for this particular survey of 2,000. We fell a little bit short of that, but for some reasons that I'll come to. But we were over 1,000, which is good news from a sort of analysis and data set point of view. As a council, we've agreed to target the month of September each year, plus or minus a week, to tail it in with return to school and so forth. That's generally to make sure that we remove any excessive tourism skew to the data. Whilst we could survey in a tourist season and we could send surveyors out for sort of a couple of weeks on the Exmoor Explorer or the 28, and we get lots of answers. We probably get a lot of answers from people that weren't native to Somerset, and whilst their views are really important on how they perceive the bus network and how easy it is to use, they're not living with it and working with it every day. So we've tried to choose a month where we'll get a little bit of tourism in there, but we'll generally try to talk with the actual day-to-day user base. It also allows us to capture education transport movements and to try to avoid some of the more adverse weather, though we did have quite a bit of wet spell during the survey period this September, unfortunately. So we ran it this year from 11th September to 7th October. We're currently collating a full data set of results at the moment. So what I'll just give you is a really very high level indication of some of the results that are coming through. And the follow-on bit of work to this is we're now going to start work with local bus operators and stakeholders to ensure we can try and get QR codes located on buses across the Somerset network, so that we can continue the survey as a pulse survey, so that there'll be an annual survey every year where we'll actually send surveyors out and talking to people for that core month. But through the year, we'll be able to collect general and continuous feedback on satisfaction levels of bus services and report on that on a 4-weekly period. The survey that occurred from 11th September to 7th October this year covered the following routes on the slide. So the 1, the Park and Ride service in Taunton, the 21A, the 22, 22X, the 25, 28, the 30, the 51, the 51 in Yeovil, the 54, 75, 77 and 81. So they were a good selection of routes. We tried to cover as many operators as we could. We tried to cover high volume routes, high frequency routes, as well as rural routes, so we get a good cross section of views, and we tried to cover as much geographically as we could of Somerset. We managed to achieve 1,248 surveys, and we had a few challenges during the survey month in terms of numbers in the first couple of weeks not being quite as high as we'd hoped, so we refocused some of the routes and focused on some volume routes in the last couple of weeks of the survey, just to try and bump the numbers up, and also make sure that we weren't riding rural routes time and time again where we were seeing the same people on each of the different days. Most of the routes that we targeted were running out of Taunton and Yeovil, but say we did try and spread a little bit further afield outside of Taunton. General reasons for the lower turnout in terms of not quite hitting our target 2,000 this time round were because we were slightly out of tourist season. So some of those estimates were based on surveys that Queenswood had done elsewhere. They'd done some similar work for Devon in the summer period, so obviously hit quite a few tourists. So 2,000 was achieved largely out of tourists. So I'm quite pleased that we haven't got such a large number of tourists in the data set, albeit a bit smaller. We had some very poor weather in September, a closure of Butlins, which impacted figures, particularly on the 28. The 28 is a really good route to survey on changeover days particularly, but then due to very high numbers, some of the surveyors couldn't actually get on the bus or move around the bus because they were so busy. So probably an indication there that maybe some work on changeover day needs to be done in terms of capacity or frequency to avoid dissatisfaction and allow more people access and ease of use of the bus. We did a lot of rural routes. Of course, numbers are quite small in rural routes. People are the same people we tend to see, so that impacted our numbers. And the survey was a little bit too long, probably this time round. We wanted to answer a lot of questions. We tried to add some additional questions on £2 fare, which were answered. But I think as we learn from this process, we'll probably shorten that survey down just a little bit. The last slide, just to pick up on some of the really high level bits we're getting back at the moment, and sorry, this is it at the minute because we're still going through quite a lot of data and trying to do a lot of cross tabulations between the different age groups and data sets to try and work out trends between different types of people and on different questions. But most of the responses came from the 17 to 24 age group, which is quite good, closely followed by the over 65, so we've got good age spread. I don't know the gender split at the moment. Most people use the bus for shopping. Again, reasonably closely followed by educational trips and work. So again, a reasonably good spread of use types. Shopping, unsurprisingly, one of the higher ones as it has been for quite a number of years, generally, particularly in rural areas. Not everyone answered the question on £2 fare cap. Only 1,117 of 1,200 odd did. But of those answers, 54% stated that £2 fare cap had encouraged them to travel more by bus. So that's quite a useful stat and ties in with some of the information that Simon presented earlier on the use and increased use due to that fare. And we answered a very catch-all question at the end, which is just generally across your view, are you satisfied with buses across Somerset generally? And 77% of people surveyed were either satisfied or very satisfied, and the split there is 51% satisfied and 26% very satisfied with buses across Somerset. So that compares well and actually better to some of the data sets we have on satisfaction from other sources like the National Highways and Transportation Survey, and we'll be pulling some of that into the analysis that we do and trying to understand that a bit more. But a broadly very positive picture, lots of information to come, particularly on the really detailed bits about, was the driver good today, was the bus shelter clean, and various other aspects of the service. And we may find some sort of ups and downs, if you like, in the data there, where it gives us some pointers as to where we should be focusing our efforts. But at the moment, a good month, a good set of results, some broadly very positive results on overall satisfaction levels, and certainly lessons learned for next year's survey. That's me done.
Thank you very much, Tim. I think some really interesting feedback there from bus users, largely positive, but obviously some other bits and pieces that need to be focused on. I look forward to seeing the full results in due course. I think it's particularly interesting to see quite how high a percentage of people were satisfied or very satisfied, particularly given that for at least part of the survey period, things were not running perhaps as smoothly as they are as they have been in the last week or so. So very useful information there. I look forward to seeing the full results. Questions from the floor. Peter Travis.
Thanks, Mike. Really interesting information and encouraging, given that in the BSIP bid, you stated that Somerset had the worst rated bus service in the entire country, at least in England. Will you be able to make any similar comparisons with this survey? Because this seems to be a one-off rather than part of, say, for example, the Transport Focus survey, which compares performances in different areas.
Right, so this survey will now be conducted annually. Obviously, it's the first of its sort, so we'll be able to pick up trends as we go forward. We've continued to participate in a National Highways and Transportation Survey, which covers a number of metrics on bus user satisfaction, public transport, and gives a very broad picture of satisfaction across quite a few metrics. So what we're doing is both as part of the bus information strategy work and also as part of our analysis work for this is pulling in those data sets, particularly for the bus information strategy regarding satisfaction of bus information over the last 3 or 4 years from 2020, and we're waiting for the most recent 2023 data to come from the National Highways and Transport Survey to add to that process. But we'll look at all the metrics of public transport and compare those to the sorts of questions we're asking in this survey and pick up trends there, so and do some analysis and some discussion on that. So appreciate we can't benchmark this particular survey with the wider country, but what we can do is benchmark Somerset's continued performance under the National Highways and Transportation Survey with the rest of the country, which is where some of those headline stats in the BSIP originated from in the first place. So we'll continue to do that and add that to our analysis.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else have any questions on the survey? No, look at that. You got away lightly and just about on time, Tim.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. We'll move on to item 9, update from the chair of the Bus User and Stakeholders Group, Peter Travis.
Thanks, Mike. I'd start by just saying that we seem to have seen a greater willingness by First Group to engage with our bus groups and bus users across the county. Really welcome Peter McNaughton's involvement, James Eustace, who's presumably overseen that approach. It's all to be welcomed. In First West of England, Tom Hughes has got much more engaged with us, particularly in Wales, where there are a lot of issues. Really welcome it. And we've long had good engagements with smaller operators. So that's really good news. What is unusual about the bus industry is that it's really the bus users who have to help promote that bus industry. It doesn't happen in any other industry where their customers actually go out promoting the services, but it does happen with the bus industry. Somerset Bus Partnership ran 26 bus stalls to help launch the September the 3rd new timetables, more than any other in the country were run here, 10 of which were on the so-called under threat routes. So we were focusing on with those particularly in mind. And we printed timetables. It's a thorny subject, and it's one I've talked to James Eustace about, and I'm in support of specific bus route timetables. The key issue is, how do you get those into the hands of the people who really need them? It's not just about printing them, it's about distributing them. And Simon Ford is absolutely right when, Simon Goff is absolutely right when he says that it can be very wasteful producing timetables which then sit in storerooms and are not got out to bus users. It's vital we have a program for distribution, and that needs to be built into the bus information strategy. It's how you get information into the hands of the people in a form that they need it, which includes printed timetables, and there needs to be a mechanism for getting them out there. We spend a lot of money, of Somerset Bus Partnerships money, printing timetables, in no small part because the September the 3rd timetable changes by First South, their booklet wasn't available until September the 20th, more than 2 weeks after those times were changed. And so we had to spend our funds to ensure that in the 20 odd bus stalls, we got those timetables to people who really desperately wanted them. We had queues of 15, 20 people waiting for bus timetables in various of our bus stalls. Now, moving on to the 4 under threat routes, and I think we have to work very hard with Somerset Council to try and ensure those bus routes are maintained. And to that end, we held a meeting last night focusing particularly on the 25 and the 28 route, and we'll be focusing tonight on the Yeovil oriented routes. We had over 40 people from councils from across the west of Somerset area, including Taunton itself, of course. And those councils are very willing to promote buses. They are keen to protect their bus services. They recognise how vital they are to their communities. And if the requirement is on them to help promote those bus services, then they're very keen to work with Somerset Council and also with Somerset Bus Partnership to promote them. What, though, they said is if they're going to promote them, they do need to be reliable. And it has to be said that throughout the discussion period, the issue of the reliability of First South buses on the 25 and the 28 was raised, particularly the reliability issues on the 25. It's not a very frequent service, and people were recounting tales of having to drive all the way to Taunton to rescue their offspring who were unable to get back otherwise. There is a feeling that Somerset or Somerset Council should monitor the cancellations very carefully of these bus routes on a daily basis. It was being suggested to make sure that First South is operating the services that they're now getting support over. So the big problem was the reliability of particularly the 25. Problem with the 28 was a different one. I mean, Simon was mentioning that it's seen the greatest recovery, as it did in his July presentation, yet clearly it's not enough to make the service viable. But we've all heard reports of the 28 being full. It was touched on by Tim just now in the survey that they were doing. Some of their researchers found it difficult to get on the buses. John Hassel has reportedly experienced lots of problems of those buses being full, and that was the message that we were getting. Would be interesting if Simon could give us some specific guidance as to what times, which services there is really large amounts of spare capacity which needs to be addressed. That was one of the requests which came from last night. So yes, the councils are going to get behind promoting those services because they are so important to their communities. As far as the passenger charter, which was mentioned, we're really pleased that that's finally being published. What we'd now like to see is it being publicised more widely on the buses themselves and in the media and promoted so that bus passengers are aware of their rights, are aware of what the bus operators have committed to doing. So finally, you'll be pleased to hear, Mike, I think the news that we've heard of the increase in bus usage is very welcome. It's really good news that the £2 fare is now being extended through to the end of 2024. It gives real certainty to bus passengers. Let's hope it provides the platform, particularly on the 4 under threat routes, but across Somerset, for us to build bus patronage. We're going to be working with Somerset Council and the bus operators to do everything we can to ensure bus patronage in Somerset keeps on going up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Really useful, comprehensive contribution there. Can I just ask, before I go to David Redgewell, who has his hand up, ask Simon Goff if he has any particular comments on that. I know we've been talking between the council and First, particularly on the 28, with regards to those services that are overcrowded. I myself was left behind in Taunton, only the second stop, so I don't know what was going on that night, but I didn't manage to get on the bus a couple of Saturdays ago. And I know that we've had a conversation about potential duplicate services, so if you could perhaps touch on that, Simon, and anything else you want to respond to in Peter's comments there.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Absolutely. The 28 has been a route that we've had challenges with, particularly around Fridays and Mondays with the Butlins impact. So we do have a contact within Butlins, so we do engage with them, and we are now being shared their data that tells us how many people they are expecting to be visiting, whether it be in the holidays, whether it be on weekends in general, which helps us to plan. In addition to that, we're engaging with GWR, Great Western Railway, because they can help inform us, and obviously they're being a sister company of ours. It makes sense that we engage and understand how many people they are expecting to be arriving, because most people that do arrive into Taunton that are going to Minehead will have a rail and bus ticket, so that helps us to plan in that regard as well. So the short answer is we've been struggling to run the network as advertised over the last few months, as I've been very sort of clear about. But now that we're in a position where things are stable and we've got, and as David referenced earlier, we have got spare vehicles available in places like Minehead and Yeovil, etc., to ensure that any breakdowns we can react to. But we are now in a position where we have got greater driver availability to use the data to provide additional support at key times where we think it is required. Obviously, that comes at additional costs, and we have to remember that. So every additional bus and driver that we put in does come at a cost, and so therefore we need to be need to be pretty clear that in making that resource available, it's the right thing to be doing, and not just having it sat there spare with the driver playing snooker up in the canteen for the day. So there is that fine balance, but at the same time, we don't want to be leaving people behind who can't get onto a 28 because they may think, well, I won't bother in the future. So it's finding the right balance. But my message is we're now in a much better place to use that data to make informed decisions on running some duplicate journeys. So hopefully we'll start to there'll be less examples of people being left behind on the 28.
That's really helpful, Simon. Anything else that Peter raised that you want to comment on at this stage?
I don't think so. I mean, there is obviously a lot there, but the one thing I would say to Peter, he referenced where he'd like to have better sight at where the capacity does remain on the network, and obviously we're making tweaks to the network to ensure that we're not running buses, that are carrying fresh air. It makes sense to nobody. But you referenced the improved engagement, which has been which James Eustace has been leading upon. He is our commercial director for the South. He has people working for him, particularly Stuart, who's our network planner. Keep that engagement going, please, Peter, with James, and he'll make sure he can share what he can with you in terms of those capacity datas. And we'd love to have your feedback in terms of how we optimise those routes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. David Redgewell.
Yeah, well, a couple of things, Mike. In the longer term, it's probably something we need to be discussing with First Great Western, First South and First Western sister company, because one of the answers for Minehead, as Mark Hotwoods has keep telling me, is to get some through trains running during the days that they transfer passengers. We've done it in the past a few times over the years. We did it when Alex Carter was the MD of South West with Mark Hotwood. So perhaps we need to pick that up. I mean, the county council the council own the West Somerset Railway. So we perhaps need to do some of the kind of work done with Swanage and the Department for Transport over that issue, as well as supplementing with the bus. It's the first group general thing to talk about there. On the issue of the 25, I'm acutely aware that goes through Bampton, and that is not in Somerset. And Exmoor National Park Authority have funding, as does Andrea Davis at Devon. And I would hope we're talking to those authorities about that route. These things shouldn't be just being picked up by Somerset. They should be being picked up across the boundary. And of course, Knock, Lacey, Clark and Ray Bryant have responsibility for 58. It is the link between Yeovil and Sherborne, which is of course a Dorset responsibility, not just a Somerset one. So I think I'd just like assurances that the other transport authorities have responsibility for these routes are engaged, as well as the town and parish councils, to fund. It's all right producing leaflets, but we really need to think about long-term funding and resources for these routes. That we are doing what we did in the past. And I can remember these routes being funded by Dorset in the past. I've checked that. They were funded, and the 25, by the way, Mike had input from Devon and Exmoor Park into its funding in the past as well. So we probably need to go back and have a look at that. Regarding regulation and responsibility, and we know his staff have been out looking because they're all over Westlink at the moment. The traffic commissioner walks round, his staff walk around Dorset, Somerset, Devon and Cornwall. We know he's been in Chew Valley at the recently time looking at the Westlink thing, because he's made it clear to Wecker and North Somerset the DRT service has now got to be 20 minutes and no further unless it changes its regulations and its frameworks, which is something Natasha's going to have a long discussion with my friend Phil Wright, who's on this call, over how we connect Westlink up in Axbridge, Mike, with the services, because they won't be able to go so far on them from Axbridge. And I'm quite worried about whether 20 minutes, how far it'll take you from Axbridge, from the 126, or from the western end, which is used by young people. Some of them go towards college on it. So there's some big talk there, but that was a commissioner decision. So they're regulators. They're not at the moment. First has got it well under control. So I'm sure they're not going to be taking a lot of action, but they're about. But I am concerned about making sure we get the maximum funding from the other authorities, our transport authorities, and have had BSIP money as well. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, David. I know that the team is, particularly Natasha, John and Ian are in regular contact with their counterparts in our neighbouring counties. I speak on a regular basis to my opposite numbers, but particularly given that one of them is called M. Rigby, the one that my opposite number in Baines, bizarrely. But I also speak to Andrea Davis on a pretty regular basis as well. So we'll take that away, though, David, and make sure that we're maximising opportunities to seek funding from our neighbours and to make sure that happens. There's a live conversation between us as a council and the West Somerset Railway about potentially improving the linkages between Taunton Railway Station and Bishop's Lydeard Railway Station and potentially beyond. So those are underway. We've recently put some funding into a feasibility study to examine exactly how we can improve those linkages as well. I don't know if anyone else, if Natasha or John have got any response to anything else that David's raised there, or have I largely covered it? I'll take that
I
as
think, Mike,
Mike,
sorry, just like to think, Phil's on the call, Phil Wright from WECA's on this call. I mean, it is the result of Kevin Rooney's interference. I don't think he's got any interest in First South at the moment, or First West of England, but he has interfered in Westlink, and it means we've got a whole different process if you live in the Cheddar Valley and Axbridge. And I do think, I don't really know whether the 20-minute zone will take you into Weston-super-Mare or take you from the villages to meet the 126. So I think it does need some John Parrott, Natasha negotiations with Phil and the team. I saw the new zones last night, and some of them cover the Cheddar area and into Baines, and we do need to have a think about that. I know there may be restrictions on our DRT system from Somerton as well. So, but this is the commissioner, not WECA or North Somerset Council.
No, understood, and I'm sure that John and Natasha will take that away from this meeting and act accordingly. Okay, if we're done then on item 9, really useful there. Thank you very much to Peter for his summation of the issues there, and I hope we've provided some answers to the questions that have been raised, but we'll keep that conversation going. I'll just return to item 2, which was minutes of the previous meeting. Peter Travis, in respect of the meeting of the 25th of July, has proposed an amendment to the 8th bullet point in the list of issues, and I'll just read out what Peter has proposed as being an accurate record of what he said at the time. The Bus Advisory Board should have been consulted on the proposed changes to the frequency of services in advance of the public announcement as required by the EPS. The Bus Advisory Board noted the closure of Bridgewater Depot and the planned closure of the Yeovil depots by First South. Peter's proposed that. David, I presume you're happy with that, David Redgewell?
Except to add the point, I think that the advisory board wanted further consultation on the proposals for Yeovil. I think that was the point that I raised, and we raised, and because we raised we went through individual services and just said that we needed to know there was maintenance and there was going to be cleaning and depot facilities at Yeovil.
If I just add to this then, that David Redgewell had requested further consultation in respect of any future depot changes. Was that I can't remember what you said, David. Does that roughly reflect it?
Yeah, but in particularly to consultation on Yeovil. Now, I've had that discussions with Peter and with Simon's team, and I'm very happy, but that needs to happen with Peter and I think with Lynn and with a few other people, and Lynn couldn't make the meeting we planned.
Okay,
Lynn,
so we'll add to what Peter's written here by saying that David Redgewell requested further consultation on the closure of Yeovil depot
and the provision of a new depot, because it's a misconception. It's not being approved. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll adapt that then. Are you happy with that, Simon Goff? You asked to. Yeah, Simon's happy with that. Okay, well, I'll
Mike and Simon, can I raise another point on that? That's fine. I'm happy with that. Simon, we've got a Western Gazette suggesting we're bulldozing Yeovil bus station.
Hang on, David.
Sorry,
David. Let me just finish this item. So
okay, certainly. Yeah,
I'll agree that the minute that we just agreed, I'll send that on to Joe Morris to adapt the agreed minute, and the minutes of the other meeting, the date of which I forget, the previous week was at the 17th. We will also accept as well, given that no one's objected. So that's item 10. Sorry, that's item 2. Now back to item 10. Any other business? David Redgewell.
Yeah, thank you. I am concerned about two things. I think the paper is called The Leveller, and I think it's called Somerset Confidential. I was shocked and horrified to read, and I have said around First Group, see the article about First Group PLC and its relationship in Somerset. The item's full of holes. It also suggests that First run services in Frooms. They do not. They do not run the 173 between Western, Supermare and Wales. The 173 goes to Bath. I think the item needs clearly looking at by corporate comms in Somerset, maybe Wecker and North Somerset, to make sure it's giving us an accurate position of First Group in the county of Somerset. It also mentions First Great Western Railways and South Western. But if that goes out in their Leveller magazine, it will create well, just an awful impression of Somerset's public transport network, and particularly First PLC, and its reputational damage to the 4 local authorities concerned, and also to First. The other point I want to make, Western Gazette this week is running a lovely picture of a bus station we're about to demolish and destroy, but it's actually Somerset County Council's leased property of their bus station, which is the County Transport Authority's responsibility, which is not being knocked down, and South West Coaches, First and other operators will be using that service. So just perhaps we can correct the Gazette and make sure there is no proposals, because it was carried on the BBC as well, that they're now going to demolish the bus station. As far as I'm aware, there's no proposals to close any bus stations in the county of Somerset, North Somerset or Wecker. In fact, Thomas is actually doing a lot of work on Bath, which will please a lot of people in the Mendips, along with First Great Western and Wecker. So I'm very pleased there's work going on Bath.
We'll pick those two up, David. I mean,
and the other point is, Mike, Taunton. I'm not going to mention the incident. You and I had an offline conversation, but we do need to get Taunton bus station back safely in operation as soon as possible. Make it a centre for all the buses and National Express in Taunton for the county. Give First some headquarters offices there, and NX and Flix, but also make sure that it's safe. We got CCTV and it's good for passengers. So any progress on that, just as soon as possible. And I would just hope we've identified a shop for those lovely people in the NHS to go and have their COVID centre as soon as possible.
Yes, the work continues on Taunton bus station, and I'm confident that that will be reopened as planned next year as part of that mobility hub that we've got funding for through BSIP. Regrettably, journalism and accuracy are not words that always appear in the same sentence, but I will ask John and Natasha to liaise with Andy Doyle on both of those issues, the incorrect photograph of your bus station and the other issue, and to try and take those up with the Leveller and with the Western Daily Press or the Western Gazette or whoever it was. But thank you for those issues, David. Anyone else? Any other business? Tony Rees.
Couple of quick things. I thought I heard Simon Goff saying the 77 might change on the 1st of January, and I don't think Thomas mentioned it. I would say with Peter, we welcome the renewed dialogue we're having with First and First West, and we have had discussions about the 77. If we're really thinking of a change in the 1st of January, then we need to start publicising it very soon.
Simon?
Sorry, I don't know the detail of it, so it's probably one for, I don't know if Tom's still there to comment on, but my understanding is that the route's being looked at for some punctuality improvements, that sort. I don't think we're looking at wholesale changes.
There was a major change being proposed, and I'm thinking that it's going to be next Easter, but nobody said anything.
Do you want to?
As far as I'm aware, in January it's centered around punctuality, but I'll make sure the dialogue remains open and we keep talking about it.
Thanks very much for that. My other question, I'm afraid I get obsessed with this one. It was in last time's minutes, as to whether anything has moved on with getting Somerset buses to be able to take cashless payments. It just seems to be carrying on and on and on. are we nearly there yet? And you don't have to answer now, but let me know
John
later.
Perrott quickly, or Ian Bell? Ian Bell's hands up. Let's go to Ian.
Right, I can tell you that we have tested last week. All the money went into the correct accounts, the machines were working. We are now in a position where we are putting all the keys, EMV keys, down to all our machines. That hopefully will be done in the next couple of days. We need to test each machine to make sure it works, and then we will be ready to go. So confidently in the next 2 weeks.
Excellent news. I'm sure everyone will be delighted. I regret that Councillor Rodriguez appears not to be on the call any longer, because he'll be particularly pleased to hear about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. I think that concludes any other business, so it remains just to agree that the date of the next meeting will be on Tuesday, the 6th of February next year. I apologise for detaining you all 10 minutes longer than advertised, but I think the time has been well spent. And can I thank everyone for their contributions today. See you next time.